Hi. Yeah, thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you for attending our webinar today. We're really excited to have you join, and we really appreciate you taking some time. Today's topic is understanding the ROI from a SOC 2 and or any other certification. I'm Dan Adams, and I'm one of your hosts. Just want to go over the agenda real quick, and then I'll introduce my co-host because I'm really excited to have Martin here today. So we'll do a quick introduction. We'll talk a little bit about what is Pima, and then deciding on a SOC 2, any concerns that we've seen from potential customers, the increase in sale and revenue, the ROI of saving time, and advice to others. It's action-packed. We also are going to build in time at the end for your questions. So for folks that are attending live, I see a bunch of you out there from all corners of North America. If you just send us questions, our marketing analyst assistants will help us out, get them over to us, and we'll answer all the questions at the very end. My pleasure today. Joining me is Martin. Martin, can you give us a little bit of background of yourself, first of all, and then I'll give a short one on myself too.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for having me, Dan. I really appreciate it. It's a pleasure to be here today. Sure, a little bit of background about myself. I started in the world of software engineering, and one day SOC 2 kind of landed on my laps. It was a surprise. I had to figure out how to get it done, like I'm sure a lot of people on this call today. And out of this, started a consulting company, helping companies becoming compliant with SOC 2 essentially. Later on, I saw another need coming out of this, which was once you're compliant, how do you share your your SOC 2 report or your compliance document with your prospects? And so that's when we started Pima essentially.
Great. We'll talk about that in just a minute. Now, it's interesting because on my journey of being in software sales for the last 25 years, certainly over the last 5 at other companies that I've been at, we have seen the need to get SOC 2 compliance. And I, at my last company, was so frustrated that we couldn't get it very quickly. It was very expensive. And so I looked out into the marketplace to see who was actually helping companies do this and found StrikeGraph. So it's really interesting that the need kind of brought you here and brought me here to StrikeGraph. So if you don't mind, I would really love it if you could share a little bit about Pima, who you guys are and who uses your platform.
Yeah, for sure. So like I was saying earlier, Pima kind of came out of a need that I saw while working with some of my clients. It's usually a process. SOC 2 in general is a process that started by the sales team, right? I'm sure you've known that then. The sales team kind of, as part of the procurement process, when they're talking to prospect, one of the questions that comes a lot is, are you SOC 2 compliant? And then, I would help those companies get to SOC 2, and sales is not very involved in the process of becoming SOC 2 compliant, but they're dying to get that report in their hands to get the conversation moving and make sure that the procurement process doesn't get stuck. And I realized that, especially after such a big gap, it takes a company 3 to 6 months, depending on their size and how quickly they can move to get to SOC 2. Sales been isolated from this, and there's no process to just get that report into the hands of sales in a safe way. There's a lot of confidential information in a SOC 2 report. A lot of time companies would like to get an NDA signed before sales can send out the report. And so, especially with larger companies, we saw essentially a pause, like sales wanted to send the report, legal wants an NDA, security wants it watermarked, and there's nothing to bring all those departments together. And so Pima was created out of that need that I saw to really bring those 3 departments together and give sales the opportunity to share that report quickly without waiting on legal and security, which are 2 usually pretty busy departments. So, who uses our platform? Most companies that use it are already compliant with SOC 2 themselves. Or actually other standards, to be honest. It's not, its platform is pretty agnostic, but we have people that share their SOC 2 report, their ISO, security policies, pen test reports, proof of insurance, cybersecurity insurance, anything that can help your sales process move along faster. That's who uses Pima essentially. So a lot of SaaS companies in the space.
Well, that's pretty excellent. Really appreciate that. That's really good background. And one thing that I was wanting to ask you, and so I'll just pose it is, so your clients, you just mentioned, a lot of them get their SOC 2. what pushes them to get a SOC 2?
That's a great question. I think that anybody that works at a SaaS company and interacts with sales will at some point hear the question coming from a prospect: Are you SOC 2 compliant? And it's just something that naturally, at first you can try to avoid it, but eventually you have to get it, just because it creates trust with your prospects. And they want to know that you're willing to put in the effort to become SOC 2 compliant, that you want to standardize on your processes, and that you are willing to invest in the security of your customers' data, right? And so naturally, everybody that I've helped either get to SOC 2 compliant, or any client of Pima that is SOC 2 compliant, the reason why they become compliant with it is to accelerate the procurement process, accelerate the sales process, and just create trust, right? It also helps to sort of separate yourself from the competition. If you're in a hot market, and you have 5 to 10 competitors, it's a lot easier to pitch to, I was going to say enterprise customers, but almost now even SMBs are asking for it, right? So when you're doing your research looking for a third-party vendor, naturally people tend to go towards the one that's SOC 2 compliant, just because their own customers will ask them if their third-party vendors are compliant with SOC 2, right?
Yeah, I drew it like akin to, as you're going to college. My two sons on my shoulder are much bigger. They're going off to college. And I said, look, once they took the SAT or the ACT, they basically had a standard, a framework. So any college could say, okay, now we know what their score is, and we'll let them into our university if it's high enough. Same thing probably with a SOC too, right? It makes it easier
Yep.
for a business, mid-sized or larger, to know that you are safe and that you have trust with their data. So that's what it's all about. And I've certainly seen that in my sales professional career. And that was one of the reasons I joined StrikeGraph. So really, really interesting. Anything specific concerns before getting their SOC 2 that anyone shared with you?
Oh, for sure. The list is pretty long, right? I mean, cost is one of them, trying to understand how much money this is going to cost for a company. There's so much that comes with it outside of just, the tools to become compliant with SOC 2. Another one is, how much time is this going to take, right? I mean, you're a SaaS company. At least the ones that I work with are mostly SaaS companies, so those are the ones I can speak for. You have a product roadmap to deliver. You have clients that expect new features to solve their problems, and SOC 2 does not add that value to your product immediately, right? So how much engineering time is this going to take? Who's going to be involved? They have all those questions, and those are real. But that there's a big payoff that comes with it, which is you can help your sales cycle move a little faster. And then, understanding the timeline is another big concern. A lot of companies don't necessarily understand what it requires and who's going to be involved. I've had people say, well, what do we have to do? Do we need a stronger password policy? Do we need to roll out antivirus on our laptops? And, really educating people about what it takes helps them understand and what they're getting themselves into, and also reduce their concerns, essentially.
Yeah, and from my perspective, we help customers get their SOC 2. And so StrikeGraph certainly is a complete platform, and also the professional services around helping customers get their SOC 2 at a lower cost, with lower effort, and a quicker duration. So these are the same concerns we had heard. And this is why we are a growing business, is because everyone that hears about it, and it always starts that way. Sales team is out trying to win business for that young software company. They hear from a mid-size or large customer, well, we need to see your SOC 2. Then they start figuring out, oh my gosh, what do I need to do to get my SOC 2? Looks like
Right.
it's gonna be a long runway. And I'm sure you've seen that too, where the old approach of just going to consultants probably was too expensive and too long. Was that fair to summarize?
Yeah, absolutely. And another point that comes to mind, that I've heard that you guys are able to help with is, are we too small for SOC 2? Right? A lot of companies, they have 3 to 5 employees or less than 10 sometimes. And I personally find it difficult coming in as a consultant to help them out because there's a lot of processes that need to be implemented. But when it's well organized and you have the platform to help them out, that helps a lot. And I heard you guys can do a pretty good job at that.
Yeah, we do help with that, and it definitely leads that, as a firm is going down that path and they want to get their SOC 2, then they get their SOC 2. The next question is, in your mind, how does getting the SOC 2 lead to an increase in sales and revenue, thus the start of the ROI?
For sure. And that's an interesting question. And the answer is it depends. For small companies for companies that sell to SMBs and not necessarily to enterprise, there will come a point where you sort of plateau, and your sales team will keep getting pushback because you're not SOC 2 compliant. So you just start losing sales to the competition. So by being compliant with SOC 2, you can actually tap into a lot more companies that will consider your product as part of the competition because you are someone that they can trust. You're a company that they can trust. The other thing is, and it's slightly indirect, but people, when you go through SOC 2, you have to consolidate your processes. You have to agree on how you're going to operate your business. And that comes with a lot of things like standardizing your vendor management policies and having a process to onboard new third parties. That means you consolidate how you spend money and which vendors you're going to be using, for example. So that as you grow, having all those processes that are standardized help you be a better business and sort of like spend less on things that you didn't know you were spending on, if that makes sense. And then from a sales perspective, you go into a call with the prospect feeling much better about your security posture and how you treat your customers' data in general, or how to simply put how you treat your customers, right? It's not just about their data. And so that really helps accelerating, in my opinion, the process of sales. From the perspective of procurement, you don't have to involve a lot of your engineering time answering security questionnaires. It's not, um, it's a well-known fact that engineering time is pretty expensive. And so you could spend it building your product, adding features that your customers want to see, or you could spend it on security questionnaires, and nobody likes to do that, right? And so by having a SOC 2 report that you can show to your prospect, you're a lot more confident. You don't get as many security questionnaires. And so you're also saving on that engineering time building your product. And so naturally, that helps. And then the third thing is also you can go after larger companies, which is larger deals, right? And naturally, when you have larger deals, that increases your sales and your revenue.
Yeah, absolutely. Our customers that have used us to get their SOC 2 have seen, and that third one, I'll go first, they've seen that ability to go up market, right? The ability to go after a larger deal with a more complex organization that is requiring or wants to require that SOC 2 seal of approval. Once they have that, they're able to bring in more revenue. So increase their average contract value, ACV, or their ARR, annual recurring revenue. And they're also able to close more deals because, again, they can box out the competition. So again, I agree with you on this. And it does lead into, because you brought up actually in your answer, something that I'll actually address for the audience, because we've seen this in the past. By choosing StrikeGraph, businesses have been able to automate security questionnaires. So I'll talk to you about that, but what way CTOs and technically efficiently use that extra time on their hands to expand the business. You started to address this. Let me talk to the audience a little bit about the question and how we help. So the question is all around security questionnaires. We can't stop a larger organization from giving it to you, but having your SOC 2 might be able to delay or decrease the full volume of those. The good news is, once a customer is on the StrikeGraph platform, they can actually just take that brand new security questionnaire that they just received from customer X. It's 352 questions. Give it to us. We will run it against our algorithms, which is both machine learning and graphing technology that has all of their controls and policies mapped out against the SOC 2 framework, and then it will automatically respond back for them. So what we'll do is we'll allow the engineers to not have to answer 10 out of 10 questions. They can just review them and maybe modify 1 out of 10. Now you've got a lot of experience working with that. Does having the engineering team have more time to work on the product? Is that something that's probably beneficial to them?
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, just for their own sanity, right? Like they came here to write code and think about complex problems, and now they have to spend time in an Excel spreadsheet, you know.
Yeah, it's certainly an area where a lot of our customers have greatly benefited. They've seen the value of it, and so it's something that again, if you have anybody has any questions about that later on, we'll answer more detail, but we'll move forward. So, what advice would you give businesses that were debating on getting a SOC 2 and or maybe a different cybersecurity certification? Obviously, there are other things like NIST and ISO and CMMC, HIPAA. Any suggestions that you have?
Yeah, that's also a good question, actually. You know, whenever I try to help a company become compliant with SOC 2, um, I we talked about how this is usually a request that comes from sales, right? Having the founders of the business understand the importance of it and getting behind it makes such a big difference. Having that leadership really help the company get behind it and explain to them why it's important is everything. Because although it is a process that is usually started by sales, it's not something that sales is very much involved in. And so it's I feel like it brings almost sales and the rest of the company closer when it's done right. And so like you know, having buy-in at that level is very important. Having the right tools and understanding that once you commit to SOC 2, it's not just a one-time thing. You know, it's going to be for the rest of the life of your company. And so if you embrace it, it will go a lot smoother than if you try to fight it. It's that's really where I've seen companies be the most successful with it and get it done the fastest. You know, it's like invest in your processes, invest in your people, invest in the right tools, and just believe that it makes you a better business. And once you do that, it just becomes a lot easier to transform that your company for the better, essentially.
Hmm. And you know what we've seen, and I'd love your input after I talk about this, is that the SOC 2 framework overlays very nicely with other cybersecurity certifications. So if you think of it as concentric circles in the Venn diagram, it does seem like there's a lot of overlap, especially with SOC 2 and ISO, but also SOC 2 and NIST, SOC 2 and CMMC. And so if you do the common SOC 2, which almost every company will accept, you then are anywhere from 60 to 70 to 80% of the way there to some other certification. Have you seen that also?
For sure. You know, a lot of times when I talk to clients, they ask me, well, do we have to do this for SOC 2? Like, what's the- you know, is there like an easier way to get there? Or, and, you know, I usually tell them, well, what's the bare minimum? They ask me that, what's the bare minimum we have to do to get there? And what I tell them is, well, would your customers be happy if they knew that that's how you were operating? And if the answer is no, then it probably doesn't work for SOC 2, right? Because it's all about creating trust for your customers. So if you think that way, naturally you're building a very strong foundation for a good compliance program for your company. And when you have good foundations, it's easy to go after another framework, right? At that point, everybody understand what they're doing it. They understand why you have to do background check, why you have to have this kind of policy, and those will apply to other frameworks for sure. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And we've definitely seen that. We've also seen that SOC 2 in many ways is it allows a smaller organization to get that running start. Sometimes, like let's just say FedRAMP. FedRAMP is a 2 to 3 year journey that small organizations aren't going to ever try and tackle. SOC
Right.
2 can be tackled by a 2 or 3 or 5 person employee company. And the faster you do it, the more you can grow and it elastically grows with you. Fair?
Absolutely. No, absolutely.
Yeah. So Great, great. I really appreciate it. All right, so let's get back to the ROI because that was topic of conversation and certainly front of mind. So there's obviously increase in sales, more efficiency in selling, and be able to be more efficient on the time saved, both on the front end, the back end. This really proves a great ROI. Any other aspects that you've seen where companies are impacted by their SOC 2?
Yeah, for sure. And I think I touched a little bit on that earlier. It really forces you to streamline your operation, right? So you have to think about every aspect of your company, whether you're thinking, HR or people ops or recruiting, customer success, customer support, engineering, security. It's really a lot of different part of your company
Hmm.
that has to come together to prove to an auditor that your company is compliant with this standard. And um, it helps with communication. It brings people together, and it forces you to have processes that are standardized across the company. And I personally find that fascinating. There are very little things that I've observed working for startups where all those departments come together. And with SOC 2, that happens. I also mentioned, standardization on vendors. When all departments are talking, it's easier to have one tool. If you're going to take, I don't know, an example, notes, right? Some people will use Evernote, others will use Notion or whatever. I've seen companies where departments don't talk to each other, and then everybody has one tool that does the same thing. Um, and so when you standardize on that, it's a lot easier to roll out one tool across the company. So you save money, everybody uses the same thing, and that's great. Another thing too is because you have to provide so much evidence, a lot of that evidence is usually tracked into tickets,
Hmm.
and being able to standardize on one ticketing tool across the company is also very helpful. Whether you need something done for the office or some plumbing needs replaced or you need a new product test, having that ID that tracking everything is important really helps. So yeah, definitely a lot of SOC 2 helps you bring your company together and ultimately become a better business, in my opinion.
Yeah, we've seen that from all of our customers as well, that because a SOC 2 is holistic, it's not just technology, it's not just people, it's not just communications, it's everything. And SOC 2 really has tried to take organizational approach holistically. We believe that the sooner you do it, the more efficient you become, and then the easier it is for you to keep up those good practices as you grow. And I would say, and actually, I see a question came in. Someone did ask that, so maybe this is a great time to answer that. Would you suggest waiting or getting it earlier? Because someone's asking that question. When's the best time to do it?
That's a tricky one to answer. There is definitely a sweet spot to it. I believe that usually, um, well, let me rephrase this. Here's how I've done in the past when I was working for a small company is try to understand what it takes to get there and start following the process closely. Start writing good security policies, start to standardize on how you onboard employees, on how you onboard customers, and how you offboard them as well. And follow the process as closely as possible until you get to a point where really the demand is driven by sales, because there is a cost associated with it. And if you do it too early, you might lock yourself into this annual recurring cost. And also, I mean, you lose a little bit of flexibility that young companies like to embrace at first. So I'd say follow the process as closely as possible for as long as you can until really it becomes something that is driven by sales, because you feel like you are either losing out on deals or deals are taking too long to close. And at that point, you're ready to really become an adult company, if you will. And now is a good time to invest in SOC 2 and do it. And at that point, do it for the rest of your company life, essentially.
I had to go on mute for a second. Working from home these days from Zoom, all of a sudden there was a chainsaw going off in the background. So I apologize to the audience if you hear any a chainsaw in the background. But I do want to keep the conversation flowing very quickly and getting onto a few more questions because we've had a few more come in. What advice do you give to members of business who want to convince others on their team to pursue a SOC 2 or other certification? We'll go with SOC 2 for the short term though. Any advice?
Yeah. And I brought it up earlier, actually, just get buy-in from the leadership. That's so important. And then once you have buy-in, make sure that they stay involved in the process, because it's their company and SOC 2 will change their company. So they have to participate in it, right? It doesn't mean that they have to be the ones making the change, but it means that when nobody seems to be able to agree on how to do it, they kind of have to intervene and make the call. And usually that helps a lot.
Appreciate that. And you know what? We have seen that some of that advice is also highly efficient as far as our customers see that they, if you get the right time and you get the right people involved, and it does start from the top down, right? So
Mhm.
buy-in from the executive team, from the co-founders, from your CEO is really key. And once you get that and you get the approval, it is a great thing that cascades down throughout the organization. So great advice there as well. Really appreciate that, Martin. So it was actually, wow, that was pretty quick. We had some questions come in, and if you don't mind, I was going to pull those open and ask those of you. Is that okay?
Sure thing.
So one was, and it was funny because it just happened here. We're in the world of Zoom and in the world of remote. People haven't officially made plans to go back yet. So the participant asks, in this Zoom world, is it easier or is it tougher to go ahead with something like a SOC 2?
That's a great question. As a consultant, I used to have to travel to my client's office to help with SOC 2. And in the Zoom world, I don't. So what difference have I seen? Compliance can be exhausting if you try to do it all at once. Like if you pack a lot of meetings about compliance and meet with all the departments in a couple of days, it becomes really exhausting for people. In the Zoom world, you can kind of like spread it out because now I don't have to be there. And so I've seen that people tend to have side conversations about it. It creates some curiosity. The auditors have fully adapted to it, and they can even do screen sharing for evidence gathering sometimes. I personally find it a lot easier to do it remotely than in person. There are very few things, especially for software companies, where you actually need to be on site, especially if all of your if you're storing your data in the cloud, they don't have to look at your office. And so, yeah, I'm all for remote audits at this point. I think it's easier for everyone.
Yeah, we saw with our business that the volume increased with the pandemic, and that it was actually something that people felt like they could achieve and could do it remotely. And as you said, as more and more companies have adopted technology that are already hosted in the cloud, there's no reason for, in some aspects, for the auditors and or consultants to be on site. So it's actually something that speeds up instead of slows down the overall
For sure.
process. Yeah,
And
so
the other
that's
thing
it.
too is I don't know why, but there's something intimidating about having a team of auditors come to your office. People are scared. Whereas when it happens online and it's asynchronous, then people are excited about the kickoff meetings on Zoom. And then they look forward to collaborating with their auditors rather than feeling like, oh, the auditors are coming to the office today. Maybe you should, I don't know, be careful about what you say.
Wonderful, wonderful advice. Okay, so I've got a couple more questions I want to make sure we get to, and then we're going to try and keep this on pace and on track so people get back to their day. But so we had talked about buy-in, right? You need to get buy-in from the organization. Any tips that you've seen to help get that buy-in across the organization?
Again, like if it comes from the executive team, it's a lot easier to get buy-in. Convincing them can be difficult, but at the end of the day, a company that has sales that are plateauing, or if you're losing deals to a competitor that is compliant with that standard, um, naturally you're going to want to invest in it, right?
Mhm.
As far as convincing, I think that understanding what it takes, and that it's really a company shift that needs to happen for you to get there. Makes a big difference. So it's really about educating your leaders, and once they get it, it helps. Yeah, it helps get buying that way.
I'm going to take my StrikeGraph hat off and go pre my StrikeGraph data, because StrikeGraph, we're in the business of helping people get their SOC 2 compliance as a audit prep firm. But prior to that, before I knew about StrikeGraph, I was able to convince the CEO of my past company, being that I was a VP of sales, that we needed it to grow our revenue. So to anybody that's attending today or on replay, from the sales perspective, know that by getting your SOC 2, you're going to be able to grow revenue and grow deal size. That is truly, I've seen personal experience, best way to get somebody that is watching the pennies, the dollars, to be able to say, yes, let's do this. And then you've got to go out and prove it though afterwards. So get the journey done as quickly as possible. If you're going to make the decision, we'd love to help you with that. And we do that for our customers. But then also, this is where Pima comes involved, help to push the information out, right? So on that post, and there was a question about that, so I'll read the question. So you've spent the time and effort to get your SOC 2. Can you help us, how do you help get the information out? So Pima, that's great for you guys.
Yeah, for sure. And it's interesting. You see it so much on companies' security pages or trust page. It's like about us. We love security and we did all this work. And then if you want to see a report or have questions, then you have to email like an obscure security@companyname.com, and you don't know who you're talking to and how long it's going to take to get an answer. Whereas like you spend all this time, money, and energy to become compliant, you should feel comfortable distributing that report. There are some prerequisites to it, like sending an NDA is a good idea. Watermarking your documents so you know who is getting them, and if you ever find them online, you know who put them out there, because I mean, like we talked about earlier, they're pretty confidential. But yeah, that's what Pima is there for, right? You can embed a form on your website, list the compliance documents that you're willing to make available to your prospects. They can request it. You can manually approve it, or you can automate the delivery, combine it with an NDA. So yeah, you should 100% leverage your compliance documents to get more sales. You shouldn't be shy about it. Post about it on LinkedIn, talk about it on webinars, put it on your security page. Allow people to request those documents, because it will help you, move the sales process faster as well.
Yeah, and again, from real world experience, both prior to StrikeGraph, when we did it ourselves, starting a marketing campaign outbound, and there are specific rules that you have to look at the AICPA page, or we can give you advice on. And with StrikeGraph, we've seen all of our customers benefit from that good seal of approval. So doing it in an intelligent fashion, using Pima to help you get that information out in an intelligent fashion, I think is a great way to really increase the ROI. You've put in the effort, you've put in the time. Now it's time to trumpet your accolades, but do it in a manner that's A, professional, and B, is safe, and Pima can help you with that.
Totally.
There was one more question that want to get to, who at the organization typically is involved in the SOC 2 process to make sure it succeeds?
Sure. Usually I find that recruiting and HR are two of the departments that help with the onboarding of employees and the offboarding of employees. Customer success and customer support will be responsible for onboarding and offboarding of customers and making sure that they have very successful journey using your product. So they're also involved in SOC 2. And then engineering, sometimes IT, if you have it, will be involved as well. Now, for a lot of small companies, that can be 2 to 3 people wearing all those hats, right? Larger organization, you tend to break it down. Each control is mapped to particular department, but usually that's it. Yeah, engineering, IT, customer success, customer support, HR, recruiting, and security if you have it.
Great. Really good advice. And Martin, I really appreciate your time today. If you don't mind, we're going to share. You can reach out to me, dan.adams@strikegraph.com, or visit www.strikegraph.com if you want to reach out to StrikeGraph. And then if you want to reach out to Martin at Pima, it's martin@pima.app or pima.app/. That's all really our time for today. Martin, we really appreciate your time and your expertise. This is a topic that is top of everyone's mind in small B2B startups. So the advice that you gave today was very valuable. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
All right. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you all for
You
attending
too.
and the questions that were brought in.
Thank you.